I've decided I'm not going to do the heavy lifting today. I'm going to let y'all come up with
Ah,
witty banter for the intro. So I don't know, say something funny.
I'm
Say
always
something
witty.
fun.
Always?
Always. This
Oh,
face scream wit.
is that starting today or is that like
Always. I mean,
okay? Do
I
you feel
mean,
a little underdressed now that you didn't come in costume like Brian?
I,
this is just my normal MO. I came
yeah,
straight from raiding a
So not a
code.
costume.
I
Yeah.
am
Yeah,
in, and I am in costume.
Oh, please tell me more.
Really tired pastor. I'm
Okay.
I'm I, I'm dressed up as a pastor who's 25 years old.
Oh, okay. Got
hmm
it.
Yeah, right. Entering my best years of ministry.
Okay. Hey, can I tell you something?
No,
Okay. All right,
he
good.
asked a
Probably it's
rhetorical
probably for the
question.
best.
No.
No, 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 no. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Me?
But I did get a hearty chuckle out of your Facebook post earlier today when you talked about breaking out the sweater vest. And
Yeah,
to me, it felt like
it's like
it
the
felt
like the
like
first Rob of Spring.
yeah, it was a consequential moment because I realized that much like Puxatawny Phil will see his shadow predict the future. When Andy breaks out the sweater vest, that's when fall starts. So happy first day of fall,
And just
everybody.
Yeah,
by a
it is
miracle, I
officially
didn't
fall.
have my by a miracle, I didn't have my space heater on this morning.
Yeah, so Brian's out pillaging, plundering, and
Arg.
generally, yeah, pirating in general. You've broken out the sweater vest.
Yeah,
Fall is here.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's here. It's that both via the the patterns of the moon and the calendar and clothes. I
Okay.
couldn't think of the right word for it. Whenever you have like what is it called, seasons? I guess seasons is the right word. See, I told you I'm witty.
Nailing it.
Mhm.
Nailing it in one. Very
Full
good.
of wit. Full of wit.
Um, you know, Bobby Witt Jr. is a good shortstop in baseball. I
Hmm.
watched his dad play. Not watch like in person, but I remember seeing his father play. I think his father was a pitcher for the Angels, I believe.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's really,
Hey,
you
can
know,
I
you're
just
getting
can
old when you begin to see the children of the players play who you watched as a child. Vladimir
Mm,
Guerrero Jr.,
yeah.
Bobby Witt Jr. Yeah.
can I just say, gang?
What? I was gonna say
But
something cool. But
yeah.
Ron James, isn't that right? He's playing with
Yeah, he's
his
playing with
son.
his son. Yeah, but his son's Ronnie's better than much better than I am, but he's not like great. So, but he's a much better player than me. So,
I
Did
think,
you were gonna say something?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is the best auditory performing we've ever done. Like,
Oh, yeah.
this is just a really good audio experience for our listeners.
I mean, the
Really
three of them
good
who
stuff.
listen are gonna love it.
The three people that listen, not that again, please. We had more than three. We at least had
Mm.
four.
I mean, for those of you on audio form, I just had my fingers very close to each other. So,
Right.
I mean, I think we're gonna be
Okay.
canceled soon.
No,
Oh,
not us.
arg, don't be so negative.
Well, I'm not
Arg.
negative. I mean, this podcast has gone longer than I thought it would, so that's a win.
Yeah. We're going to
Hey,
slay critics.
we're gonna we're gonna make it at least to 10 episodes, and we're gonna have a surprise guest join us. So that's people. That's all I'm telling you for
Woo.
now. So
Okay.
stay tuned for that. It'll be good.
As well, I guess this is a cold open.
It's a cold open.
Sure.
No.
Hello, theologians, and welcome to Methodist to the Madness, the show about the wacky, cool, wild, and weird stuff that's happened in church history. I'm your youth pastor, Mary Beth.
I'm lead pastor Andy.
And I'm a pirate, Brian.
Like, okay, so the ship is gone. We're back in the office, but we do still have the eye patch and the hat. So that's a great way to kick off
I'll get rid
talking
of it.
about
See, there we go. There we go. I just want to
very
have it open for the cold opening or whatever.
well. You can put it back for the episode if you want,
I'm good.
but then you
Hat
have
a
to
little
talk like a
itchy.
pirate the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Hmm. Y'all, we're talking about actual stigmatics today. Our last episode, we were going to talk in more detail about those who have received stigmata, and then we had some really good holy conversation around suffering. And so we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty of it today. And I figure we'll just dive right in. What do we think? What say you?
Let's
Let's
just
go for it.
go
Swan
for it.
diving in.
Get right
Okay,
in there.
so we've now said for 3 episodes, St. Francis is the first ever stigmatic, recorded stigmatic. Andy, do you
Is that
remember?
right?
He's the first
You sure
one.
about that?
He's the first
That's only
one.
because we're recording this episode the same week as the we said it last time, and I wouldn't have believed it if you did this next week. I would have forgotten that fact.
Well, now you've heard it 3 times now, so hopefully it sinks into your brain cells.
I don't know.
It happened in 1224. Okay, so it was 2 years before he died, which if you recall in our episode on St. Francis specifically, we talked about how that was kind of interesting that he received it later in life. And he had gone to Mount Laverna for a 40-day fast. And according to legend, near the feast of the exaltation of the cross, there was a six-winged angel that came to Francis while he was praying. And as the angel approached, Francis could see that the angel was crucified, which I think is really interesting. I wonder what that means. But the angel apparently appeared to be crucified.
Hmm.
And he was, quote, humbled by the sight. I don't think that's how I would feel, but that's how Francis felt. And that's why he's a saint and I'm not. And
How would you
his
how,
heart
how would you feel if you had an angel appear
freaked
to you?
out,
You'd
Okay.
panic
freaked
and
out.
scream.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
wouldn't scream, I don't think,
I
but
just
I
thought I
would.
thought you were gonna, I thought you were gonna you weren't before you weren't humbled. I thought you'd be like, well, it took you long enough.
No, I
That's
wouldn't
where I
be.
thought
I
you were
wouldn't
coming.
razz the crucified angel. Like I'm not
I
gonna
mean, the
dog
way
him
you
out.
said that made it seem like, come on, Angel, we're on a time crunch here. Come on.
Hey, about time you showed up. No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't give it attitude. I would be a little freaked out. Like, what happened to you? What are you doing here? Especially if it was a seraphim. Can we just clarify that? If I was gonna do a haunted house, I would have like seraphim outside my door and my bushes with all the eyeballs and all
Yeah.
the wings and everything. Y'all know
Hmm.
what I'm talking about. Look it up.
Yeah.
And so this crucified angel comes up. Francis is humbled, but his heart is also filled with, quote, elation, joined by pain and suffering.
Mhm.
And the angel kind of swoops over him. And then when he leaves, Francis has wounds in his hands and his feet and his side, right? So he's got
Nice.
nail marks in his palms, the soles of his feet, and he's got a lance pierced
Mhm.
scar situation in his side. And so what's even remarkable about this is that he could see, like, not just the wounds, but in the moment that the angel passed over, he could see nails in his hands. Um, and the wound at his side started to leak blood.
Mhm.
Okay. So,
Well,
um,
a stupid question. Was this how? I guess this is how open was the wound? Like it was a like
enough to see.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like that's my thing. Like with the stigmata hands, is it like just a hole? Do you
Yes.
have anything you read? Let's just straight through.
Yes. At least that's what we see in 13th century art, right? So all the
Yeah.
artists at the time that have recorded and said that they were eyewitnesses of this, it's just a hole,
Hmm.
black hole.
Yeah.
Some you can see straight through, some you can't because they're still bleeding, right? Y'all remember
Hmm.
we talked about
Hmm.
the odor of sanctity or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
these are still wounds, right? Not all of them close. Some of them do, some of them don't. And as you'll see as we get into it, everyone's stigmata is different.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a snowflake. It's all different.
All right.
So we have an eyewitness to this, supposedly, Pope Alexander the sixth, I think, or the ninth, I don't know. One of those guys, I should have recorded the number. Pope Alexander. Again, I don't really research. I just give you like the Walmart version. I don't save like I just gotta be honest. I don't save my good
So
stuff for this podcast. Like,
come here for your mediocre church history.
yeah,
That's
like,
right.
and that's
We're
very
not
good.
exactly tied to history or anything like that.
It's mediocre history is
Well,
great. I like that very much. That feels comfortable for me. So he declared, Pope Alexander the whatever declared that he had seen the marks before and after Francis's death. So he saw right after it happened the wounds, and he saw it that the wounds stayed even after Francis had died. So um, we have a biographer
mhm.
who chronicles the life of St. Francis. He's the first ever biographer of St. Francis, and his name is Thomas of Solano. And he wrote First Life of St. Francis, and he records what's happened here with the stigmata, right? And how he thinks that um, Francis would have felt about it. And he claims that Francis didn't know what the vision meant. So he describes it not necessarily as a physical
Mm-hmm.
situation, but as a vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he goes on to say that Francis was experiencing throughout receiving the stigmata, he had sadness and happiness, joy and grief, and alternated between those two extremes. And he wondered anxiously, this is a direct quote, he wondered anxiously what his vision could mean. And his soul was uneasy as it searched for understanding. And as his understanding sought in vain for an explanation, his heart was filled with perplexity at the great novelty of the vision of the nails and how they began to appear in his hands and his feet, just as he had
Mm-hmm.
seen them in the vision of the crucified man above him. So,
I think that's an interesting concept to think about the fact that I heard a Bible preacher teach years ago, something that stuck with me for years. He said, we no longer teach the mystery of God. So let's think about the fact that Francis existed pre-Enlightenment. And so there, we talked a little bit last week about superstition, things like that. We are the all of us, even the postmoderns among us, are have been formed by the scientific method, provable, understandable. We aren't comfortable with mystery.
yeah.
And so it makes a lot of sense that the first one ever. So he didn't say, "Oh, look, I've got the stigmata." He didn't know what was
Mm-hmm.
happening, you know. So there was no, and so yes, it would have been a very perplexing, confusing, unsure situation. And so, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that he pondered these things. And I think one of the great failings of the post Enlightenment church is the fact that we no longer ponder mysteries. We want everything to make
Yeah.
sense. We want everything to make sense. We want everything to be easy, clean, check it off, move on. We don't want to sit with mystery for decades, even. You know, so I think it's interesting to hear this heart was both joyful and sad at the same time. Um, Mystery should make us do that. Tragedy should make us do that. Life should make us. You can be both joyful at an event and sad at an event. You know,
Mm,
it's not. Our emotions are not clean like that. They can be interwoven amongst them.
Right.
But we don't like
that's good.
messy. You know, we don't like messy.
No, and the stigmata is, as we talked about last episode,
Yeah,
it's not only is it suffering, but it's super messy. I mean,
totally.
so this biographer goes on and he describes like what it actually looked like with the heads of the nails appeared on the wrist. So, like,
Mhm.
starting at the wrist is where they said that they saw the nails and then it went all the way up into the palms and the palms would bleed, right? And so he gives like this really detailed description of what it looked like.
Mhm.
Small pieces of flesh jutting out from the rest took on the appearance of the nail ends, bent and
Mhm.
driven back. In
Mhm.
the same way, the marks of nails were impressed on his feet and projected beyond the rest of the flesh. And then when he's talking about the piercing of his side, it was so much blood that it wet not only his tunic, but also his trousers,
Mhm.
right? So this is a very physical, very messy thing. And over time, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit, there have been scientists and men of medicine who have come along and tried to offer explanations for what's going on. And the first scientist person that came along trying to make sense of what we have recorded here was a cat named Edward Frederick Harding. Harding? It doesn't matter. It's not Harding.
Just
That's
roll
not
with it.
right.
I like
Hartung
how many
concluded.
things don't matter. Ah, what's the matter?
It's
Hey,
just
listen, this is all fun and games here. You know what
Sure,
I'm
what you
saying? This is
sure you sure when Doctor wasn't House MD, or is
it,
it Doctor Quinn Medicine
it was
Woman,
Dr. House. And
or
it
Doctor
was
Who?
Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil came on the scene in 1935 and said,
Well, he was
"This
the
is the
doctor.
reliable. Mhm.
Doctor Who." It could be anyone at this point. Who cares?
By the way, don't get me
This is the
started.
episode.
I have very strong feelings about Doctor Phil. So
Oh,
Oh,
let's pause the podcast and
no,
talk
let's
about
not.
that.
yeah.
Let's not. Let's
Let's
not.
hear
Let's
about.
Let's
chase
not.
that.
Let's not.
Let's
Let's not.
chase that
Let's,
red herring.
they're here. People are here for mediocre history. They're not here for my opinions about Doctor Who, Doctor Phil.
What's wrong with with my boy Phil? I mean, what has he done?
What is
This
this
guy's
doc?
helping.
What is his doctorate in?
I don't know.
I think it's in
I don't
English. No offense to
English.
English. No offense to English PhDs. That's a real thing. But I don't know. I'm just not a fan of. I've got too much of the my mama in me. You shouldn't be
Oprah likes them.
that's you shouldn't be airing your dirty laundry on TV. You shouldn't be no. I don't like anyone who profits on the
Exploitation of others'
yes.
problems.
Yeah, even though they're agreeing to do with it, I just think it's, any industry or anything that's built upon the exploitation of those who are particularly weak at the moment is just something I find offensive. So my children know
I feel about Jerry Springer.
uh, at least he did at least
Jerry.
Jerry didn't take himself seriously.
No, he didn't.
Okay, Brian,
he knew it was a spectacle.
I've come up
Yeah,
with a great idea. Are you ready?
I'm
For our
ready.
100th episode, let's have a Dr. Phil watch party, and Andy will watch an
I will
episode
not be
and comment on it.
participating. I will not be doing
No,
that.
you
No.
can commentate
100
on it.
episodes. Oh, good Lord. No, that's not happening. The Lord will come back by the end.
No, our 100th episode will do something huge, and it
All
will be
three,
better than
all three of our
Dr.
followers will love it.
That's
Stop doing our people like that. You know we've got at least five. Like
six. I don't know.
the number's slowly going to increase. Anyway, the point is, Dr. Horton comes in 1935, and he claims that he knows what's going on with St. Francis, right? And
When
he
was this
said
again? You said when? 1930?
35.
Okay. So I thought you said, just make sure.
He believes that Francis has an eye ailment known as
Mm,
trachoma and quartern malaria. Okay.
mm,
So quartern malaria infects the liver, spleen, and stomach, which
Yikes.
is freaky to me. Like, how does the eye do that? And somebody will surely write in and say, that's not how you pronounce it. And it'll probably be my husband. And the thing is, it's okay. Again, in this episode, we don't care. We're just saying words at this point. So there's a liver, spleen, and stomach situation happening here, and it causes intense pain. And at the time of St. Francis, 13th century, it would have been known as purpura, is what they would have called it. Okay. And that's a purple hemorrhage of blood into the skin. And according to
mm,
Hartung, if this were the case of St. Francis, he would have been afflicted by an exceedingly large purpura. And the purple spots of blood may have been punctured while in the wilderness and then
mm,
appear as an open wound that would have
mm,
mimicked Christ wounds.
mm,
Frankly, I'm a skeptic. I'll put it out there right now.
mm,
I
Yeah.
think y'all probably know that. I believe in miracles, believe
mm,
in wonders and signs, but I also am a skeptic at heart. Okay, I'm
yeah.
Thomas, doubting Thomas, and I think it's such a stretch to say it was just like a coincidence that he had this thing that caused him to have wounds
Mhm.
that opened like Christ.
Yeah.
Like that's just too coincidental for me.
And I don't actually have a problem if that was what it was, because I think,
Really,
yeah, well, science and medicine, science and faith don't contradict. They don't. They're allies. I
Yeah, they don't
mean,
have to.
yeah. So that might
agree
just
with that.
that could be the tangible explanation of what it was. Sure.
I mean,
For the
Doesn't
hands, feet, and sides, you
Yeah,
think?
why not? I don't know. I mean, I don't
That's
know if
just
that
too
was real, but
coincidental.
it doesn't bother me if that's the case, because this I mean, just because you physically experience something doesn't mean there's not a spiritual understanding or understanding that happens within it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Um,
That's fair.
I heard somebody put it like this: science explains the how, religion explains the why.
mhm. Yeah.
So I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think that's what it was, but if it was, okay, cool.
So let me hit you with this. 1987, we have another doctor come on the scene, and he says, "Nah, boys, Francis had leprosy." What do you think of that?
I
Leprosy.
don't know enough about leprosy. Does it form wounds like
I know it
that's being?
rise, but I didn't think it caused bleeding necessarily. But I'm like you, I'm not an expert on leprosy, so I don't know. I
You
mean,
know,
why not? I mean, once again, I mean, all of our understanding is synapses firing in the brain. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, but something causes it.
yeah,
I mean, the Holy
That's
Spirit has to,
interesting. Yeah.
the Holy Spirit has to affect the physical, tangible body, and so sure, maybe that's how the Lord did it.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think we're asking the wrong questions if we think that scientific explanations negate faithful understandings.
Right.
Yeah, and I like the point of just because we can explain how something happened, we're not explaining why it
Yeah,
happened. like
Right.
God could have made that thing happen. That's a
I,
good point.
I mean, okay, so the burning bush. Um, Moses is bebopping along and he sees a bush on fire. And it interesting if you read the text, you see he is not taken aback by the fact that the bush is on fire.
Right.
It's not being consumed that culture. Like, well, what's this? Because in that culture, I mean, in that physic, in that geography, in that environment, as hot as it is, bushes catch on fire all the time there. For a
Hmm.
lot of miraculous things, there are tangible understandings of what's happening. So, okay, cool, awesome. I mean, yeah, that doesn't explain the spiritual reality of it.
Right. Like
It.
there's a show, you know, the History Channel, they talk about scientifically how they can explain the plagues that
Hmm,
fell upon Egypt, that it really
sure.
did happen. And this is kind of like how it did happen, but we know
Hmm.
why that happened.
Yeah, that's
And so
exactly right. Remember, it's the why. It's the why. I mean, I think, now that said, I think it was a divine miracle. And the reason why I think that is because if you know anything about how the Catholic Church judges things, they don't just say, "Hey, I saw Jesus in a loaf of bread and it was a miracle." No, I mean they act the institution are very scientific in their understanding of these type of things. So every saint must have a miracle attributed to them, and these are provable miracles. Are documented. As best we understand them type things. So I mean, I think it was something miraculous personally. However, if it is explained by illness, okay, cool. Then that's just how God did it.
So
That's all
this
he
is
did.
really interesting too, in conjunction with the right. If we're thinking in terms of the why and
Hmm.
not the how,
Yeah.
I think it's curious to consider why the majority of stigmatics are female,
Hmm.
right? Which is our next point, states the
Hmm.
stigmata and gender. And we really didn't make that connection until the late 19th century. There was
How
a
many
French physician,
stigmatic? How many stigmatics do we know? Ballpark.
244.
Okay. I knew there's a lot, but it wasn't like 5 million either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 244 is where we're at. And French physician Imbert Guberi began compiling a census of known stigmatics from the 13th century to his time. And the census included, to already take what I say with a grain of salt.
Hmm.
So as of 2019, 244, but in this guy's census, he had 280. And the reason that we see 280 is that all of them were women. There were only 40 males.
Hmm.
Okay. So women comprised about 88% of the stigmatics that he recorded.
Hmm.
Okay. And then it was the University of Antwerp in 2019 that did the database and concluded, okay, these are the guaranteed 244 that we see. 92% of
Hmm.
that were women. Okay. So, and I guess that the numbers are conflated because I've read that there were convents where the sisters would try to shield somebody that was a stigmatic from
Hmm.
public scrutiny because they
Sure.
didn't want it to be
Yeah.
a
A
something that
roadshow.
affected the
Yeah.
reputation of the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
convent or
Sure.
like
Yeah.
brought in too much attention or whatever. So the number may even be higher than that.
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, and so we have a bunch, like hundreds, literally, of women who had stigmata. And yet, still, the two biggest ones that people only know about and that we talk about are St. Francis and a guy we're going to talk about in a minute named Padre Pio.
Hmm.
So this is my feminist soapbox rant that we need to be. Hello, welcome. It's a podcast, women in a podcast. Welcome to Feminist Rants. And I think it's interesting that we don't know more about the women that have received stigmata and we don't know more about their experiences. I
And
think the most recent
yeah.
one is from 1948 and her name was Sister Romualda. And we actually have pictures of her with her stigmata.
Hmm.
Um, and it is kind of jarring because she had it in her hands and it's like gaping. I don't know if y'all can see that, but like
Yeah.
those
Wow.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
like that's 1948. That's not that long ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Confirmed, right? Like
I
that's
think
crazy.
I think I was a teenager back then. I mean, well, and that's interesting to think about in terms of, so that is interesting about why we don't know more about the women who would have had stigmata because the church has always, but the church has by and large done a good job of documenting female mystics because I always attribute
Yeah.
I attribute stigmata in the same kind of concept as the mystics.
Well,
So
all mystics have been, no, all stigmatas have been
have been
constituted as
mystics.
mystics. Like
Yeah,
there
that's I
is
mean,
that direct,
yeah.
yeah, like,
So some of the great mystics in church history have been. In fact, I would often. I mean, when I think of a mystic, I first think of Julia Norwich, for instance.
right, Catherine
I
of
think
Siena,
so. Yeah, there's the
Hildegard.
exact. It's exactly right. So I do think that's interesting.
And there's no shame in that,
No,
right?
not
Like
at
there's
all.
no
No, no,
like
no, no, not at all.
limitation
That
of like the
so I
church
do.
celebrates it.
I do. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I do think it's interesting, though. You're right that the ones we think of are Francis and Pia.
Yeah.
And of course, here we are speaking as three Protestants. So what do we even know about this? Um,
Yeah, right.
you know, that's a very interesting observation. Yeah, that's very interesting. I have never really thought about that in regard. Yeah. So
I don't know. I just thought it was worth ranting about for two
yeah.
seconds.
There you go.
Um,
You
but
get off your womanist soapbox now. Just
Hmm.
yeah, so we can shove that back in the corner. We can
yeah.
just kick that right on out. Um, Another thing that I think is really interesting is the number of people that have fake stigmata,
No.
right? So there was a woman named Magdalena de la Cruz who confessed before she died that her stigmata was a deliberate deception.
Mm.
And it was like a really big deal because people really,
She's fixing to go meet Jesus. She's like, oh, I better clear this up before I leave.
yeah, she said,
No,
"Hey,
no.
listen to me. I was just JK, JK, JK. It wasn't for real." But I wonder too. Hold on, I'm gonna verify because I don't want to give you the wrong date. Yeah, so that was around 1560 that she came out. So it was like well after St. Francis's
Mhm.
time. Um, and she was an enemy of, Andy, you love this, Saint Ignatius of
Oh,
Loyola,
wait,
because
why did he get an enemy? What did he do? He's great.
he thought she was faking it.
Oh, come on. He knew. He
He
Yeah.
knew.
knew. Yeah,
There you
it's a
go.
really interesting story. She was also a huge fan of Teresa of Avila, right? And so like she was who was a mystic, and so I'm wondering if there was like um whatever, but she went straight to the Pope to confess that she did wrong.
Wow.
So she went to Pope Paul the third at 12 years old. This is just so interesting, and it's not super relevant to what we're talking about, but you'll have to hear this because it's insane. At 12 years old, she says that the devil solicited her and lay with her and bid her that she pretend to have the stigmata and that the devil had lain with her for the last 30 years.
I have okay.
Um,
I remember this now from history now a little bit. I remember the broad outlines of it. I remember because you don't hear a lot of things of the devil with that. So yeah, yeah.
so it was a fake demonical stigmata, right?
Well,
And the thing
but
is, I'm pretty sure she was an abbess too at one point and had was honored as a living saint. Like so when she was
Oh
alive, they
wow.
had sanctified her for her stigmata, and then she went to the Pope and she said, "Hey, listen, me and Satan, we're
mm,
like,
but
you know what I'm saying?" So like wink wink.
but think about it though. I mean, I mean, it's apples and oranges here, apples and oranges. But how is the stigmata different from any other spiritual gift? You know what I mean? Which a spiritual gift is something that God gives to us for His benefit, for our benefit, for the glory of the God, for the glory of the church, the good of the church. And I mean, how often are people accused of or try to or desire spiritual gifts that they may or may not possess because they
Mhm.
think it puts them on a higher spiritual plane? You know, what did Paul say in Corinthians? That, just one part of the body envious of the other. So maybe, I mean, morality makes, envy makes liars of us all. Morality makes liars of us all. I wish I was as holy as so and so or such and such. I wish I had the faith of so and so or such and such. So I mean, not defending, but I see how one could, and of course she gives it a spiritual explanation. I mean, she says the devil made me do it. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I think Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. Temptations look different in every context, but the same temptation. It's pride,
Yeah.
it's envy,
Yeah.
you know. I will not be faking stigmata, though. I can guarantee that much.
No, yeah, that'd be one I would. It's too
That's
messy.
I'll
Too
leave
much.
that to the folks that got it. I'm good.
So there was a neurologist who claimed that saints who produce miracles or stigmata, or who claimed to be possessed in the way that this woman did, were actually suffering from epilepsy.
Mhm.
And make that make sense? I don't understand that. Or hysteria,
Mhm.
which, as we all know and can agree, is a loaded term in today's America. Because what hysteria? What does that mean, right? Like
It,
typically, it's the term that's used to just say
it it is without
crazy
it is
pants.
without a doubt Def Leppard's best album.
So,
Just saying. I think it's their best
okay,
song, but definitely their best album.
this is what I think is actually more interesting than the Def Leppard album. Some
I
modern
don't know.
research
That's a
has
great
indicated.
album. I mean, if you haven't listened to Hysteria recently, you need to go back and listen to that. That's a great album.
Can I tell you something? And I mean it so
You
sincerely.
don't know who Def Leppard is,
And
do you?
like from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my heart, I mean this. It's maybe the most true thing I have ever said to you. I hate, have never listened to Def Leppard
That
and
doesn't.
probably never will.
Well, you're missing out because Hysteria is a phenomenal album. But whatever, you're a child, so you don't know
Thank
good
you so
music.
much. Okay. So
Mm.
I see you do this thing when we record our podcast, and I
What?
am gonna go off about it because I'm just in a tangenty mood today.
Okay.
Like you
Grumpy pants.
intentionally, I'm a little grumpers, and so
You
like
are.
you intentionally derail me. You know I have ADHD.
Mhm.
You know that I have issues staying on track.
I do. It's
And so
fun.
then you bring up something like Def Leppard, and I can't think of anything. And the way my brain works is I hear Def Leppard, and then I'm visualizing leopards. And so then I'm getting onto you while at the same time simultaneously thinking, how much do you think it costs to buy a leopard? You know what I mean? And so
Oh,
like
that's like a
now my brain,
leper. I was thinking you're going to buy a leper. I think that's slavery and that's illegal.
No, but I bet. Well, how much was it to buy
bird.
a tiger? Remember, it was like
Tiger
what,
King.
$10,000, five
Was
They
it?
thousand.
got that. They got that old zoo in Collins. I'm just saying.
Oh,
Is it still
oh,
working? Is it still
No, it's
active?
not.
no, it's not. And I've
It's
done a
not.
deep dive on that one. We could do a special non-Bible related episode on the Colin Zoo because I have gone so far down the rabbit hole about the Colin Zoo. I could tell you everything about it.
The
But
literal
see, that's
rabbit
my
hole.
point.
Mhm.
That's my point is there were no rabbits at that zoo. But that's my point is like, I need you to help me. You know what I mean?
Nice. There's a rabbit.
Okay.
Rabbit
Okay,
here.
Brian,
Yeah.
please to not do rabbit filters. I need us to be serious. We're trying to get through an episode. Okay. So please don't distract me with things that are going to derail me if you can. Thank you. I appreciate it. Um the thing about it now is some people claim that, and I can't even look at you. I don't okay. My Google box has been
I
taken
have
over.
all these options. I'm going to use them. I mean, come on. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
Breathe in.
Hysteria now is being
Mhm.
translated as dissociative identity disorder.
Mhm. Okay.
Fascinating.
It is.
Fascinating. Um, do you guys know what DID is?
No. I think I do. I
Oh,
mean, I think I do, but I'm not. I
what do
would
you
not.
think it is?
Say it again. What did you say it was?
Dissociative,
Isn't what
dissociative identity disorder.
isn't what we used to call um split personalities?
Yep.
Okay,
I guess so. Yeah.
Bingo.
that's what I thought it
Multiple
was.
personality disorder, right?
Multiple
That's like
done,
the
yeah.
new term. Yeah. So people with DID experience switching. So they may switch to another identity. They experience amnesia. And this is not a blanket, like everybody with DID
Mhm.
experiences this. This is just like a symptoms that you may or may not experience. Okay. So switching, amnesia, hearing voices, intrusions of identities, voices, or memories into their everyday activities when you just be living life and you hear things,
Mhm.
and behavior changes. So I think it's interesting that we have modern research that's like
Mhm.
thinking stigmata is related to like
But
that
that
because I
doesn't
think it's
explain the physical part of
Yeah,
it, though.
I
It
yes, it
agree.
does.
explains
Well, no,
if
but yes, I get what you're saying.
if
Okay,
people
but hear me
verify
out.
yeah.
If well, let me put this out there before I say this. The likelihood that we have 200, 300 plus people that are experiencing DID when it's as rare as it is now,
Mhm.
I don't really buy. However, theoretically, if somebody was suffering or experiencing DID, not suffering, just living with DID, and they have those uncontrolled personality, whatever, you could have one personality cause the physical ailment, right? And then the other one not remember.
But like I kind of agree with Brian, and once again, knowing very little about stigmatas, the wounds are more permanent, correct?
Theoretically.
And if this was just a wounding of yourself, unless you were going to continually keep the wound open, it
Ugh,
would
Yeah,
heal
I
up.
don't think it makes sense. Brian goes,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't think it makes sense either. I'm just saying that that's what modern
Yeah.
science has
Well, I mean,
posited.
this is kind of like, I mean, and I appreciate people wanting to learn, but this is like when you DNA test the Shroud of Turin. Either you believe it's a miracle or you don't. Like, there comes a point you gotta say, okay, I can't explain everything, and
yeah,
Yeah,
and
right.
but once again, that's that whole modern mindset that we approach religion with that we sometimes have to disabuse ourselves of, and say,
Now,
listen,
another part of it, though, that you might think it's interesting too, is that there is also um, a lot of stigmatics,
mhm,
stigmatics, stigmatics experienced the need and the desire to like deny the body, right? And so like they
mhm,
would
mhm,
fast.
mhm,
Well, when you have extreme self-starvation, we
mhm,
know disassociative mental
mhm,
states, and there
mhm,
can be self-mutilation plays out.
mhm,
Anorexia nervosa will
mhm,
cause self-mutilation similar um, to stigmata as part of a ritualistic kind of obsessive compulsive disorder basis, right? And so the relationship between starvation and self-mutilation is something that corresponds. And so there is a possibility of that. Um, but yeah, I tend to agree with you. It's either a
yeah,
miracle or it's not.
yeah.
Um,
yeah.
I mean, once again, we serve a Lord who rose from the dead. Like I just
you know what I mean?
we believe in a literal resurrection. So yeah, well, leaning into the weird.
Right.
This is weird, and
Yeah.
our faith is weird, and that's okay.
Yes. And so there's a guy named Ted Harrison who wrote a really good book called Stigmata, Medieval Phenomenon in the Modern Age. And in it, he said that there's no single mechanism whereby the stigmata is produced. Okay, which yeah, that's the conclusion that we're basically coming to now. And he found no evidence from his studies of contemporary cases that the marks were supernatural in order. However, marks of natural origin need not be hoaxes, right?
Mhm.
So he comes to the conclusion that some stigmatics would mark themselves in an attempt to suffer with Christ as a form of piety, and others mark themselves accidentally, and their marks were noted as stigmata. Um, but often marks of human origin produce like profound religious response regardless, right? And so
Mhm.
even if they were man-made, they still had religious implications
Right.
is what he kind of comes to. So I think whether you're a skeptic or you're somebody that is like full on, like, yeah, I totally believe that it was spiritual, or I totally believe that they did it to themselves. It doesn't really matter either way at the end of the day, maybe because God used it anyway.
Well, okay, so like, if you're ever so lucky to go to the Holy Land, you're gonna come upon things that are the authentic places something happened. So like, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt where the teaching steps are where Jesus taught this lecture to the Sanhedrin. I mean, I've stood in the spots where he said, "Woe to you, blind guides and scribes!" Like I've been there, I've stood there. But there's also a certain place at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the traditional site of the resurrection and the cross of the resurrection. There's a marble slab right as you come into a certain part of it that it where his body was laid. His body was not laid
Mm-hmm.
there. Like his body was not laid there. It didn't happen there. Just there's 0% chance it happened there. 0% chance. 0% chance that was the slab his body was laid upon. 0% chance. And to see the religious devotion that would happen there was so moving and so powerful because one of my takeaways was if it didn't happen there, it did happen somewhere. And that
Mm-hmm.
spot is a stand in for the actual place. In
Right.
much the same way, when we take communion, we're not feasting at the Last Supper with Jesus and his disciples. We're not. We're eating pita bread we probably brought at Kroger and Welch's we probably brought at Kroger, more likely than not. But on a spiritual level, we are at the Last Supper. And on a
Mhm.
spiritual level, we are at the wedding feast of the Lamb in eternity. And in a spiritual
That's good.
level, we are feasting with our parents and grandparents and with the saints who have gone before. So practically we're not, but spiritually we are. Once again, that we don't need to we do not have to play by the rules of the world. We don't have to buy into this sacred and spirit, the profane and sacred divide. We don't have to. We it can be both. It can be both. In fact, it usually is both. Hmm.
Hmm. And that's beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So the most famous stigmatic is not actually St. Francis.
He was
It is
stigmatic. He had the stigma. He was stigmatic. Saint Frank.
yeah, he was the first recorded one.
Okay.
Did you know that?
Who would
I
have known?
Amazing.
didn't. Thank you.
Amazing. Remarkable. No, it's actually Padre Pio. All right. So we're going to talk about him just for a minute. He was born in 1887. So that's significantly later than
Yeah.
St. Francis. And he had visions from the time he was 5 years old. All right. So he started
Wow.
having visions at the age of 5. And he decided to dedicate his life to the Lord because obviously, apparently, he didn't have a choice. He was 5. And so in 1903, he entered the Capuchin Franciscans and he was ordained a priest in 1910. So this is all relatively modern
Hmm.
history,
Yeah.
right? Like this is not that super long ago. And he said, one of his most famous quotes is, I am devoured by the love of God and by the love of my neighbor, which is like radical,
Pretty
totally.
good.
The prophet
Pretty good
Jeremiah
stuff.
would have eaten that up.
That's
You know what
right.
I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's good stuff.
Hmm.
So 8 years after he was ordained, though, he had a vision in which he felt himself pierced with a lance, and the lance wound stayed with him. And on my birthday, which is when pop quiz,
September
okay,
Love.
20
yeah,
to 20
we'll give it to you September 20th. Yes, we're just
21.
gonna let you. No,
I
20th. Dadgummit, I was letting you have it, and then you kept on.
I
Y'all
can
are
barely
fake
remember. I
friends.
can barely remember my wife and children's birthdays. So.
It's fake friendship is what it is, and I will remember that and keep that in mind
There
for
you go.
future. On September 20th of 1918, while he was making his Thanksgiving after Mass, which is a really fancy way of saying that he was saying, thank you, Lord, for everything that you've done for me, he received more wounds. All right. So, first time he had it was on August 5th. And then uh, uh, September 20th, he received the wounds in his hands and his feet. And each day, documented, recorded, I want y'all to think about this. He lost a cup of blood
Mm.
Gosh.
afterwards. Do you understand what I just said? He lost a cup of blood and the wounds never closed or festered. Um, and guess what else? He had that sweet, sweet smell
That's
of
sweet. No.
bloody stigmata. Like
Mhm.
had that rosy smelling blood coming from his wounds. This is so bananas to
Yeah.
me. Like,
It's weird. Yeah.
So, and that's the thing with this, like as you said, this is okay. Uh, we could say, oh, back in the 1500s, whatever, but like this is like the past
Yeah.
1918.
century. This
Yeah.
this, this is since major elements have been just found. Like this is post quantum mechanics. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
yeah, I mean this is past a lot of. We weren't using leeches in the 1900s. Like this is real. This is valid, and this is
Do they
past a
have
lot of
pictures
our.
of his stigmata too? Are there pictures of his?
Yeah,
I know
I'm sure
you.
that there are. I'm sure that there
He
are. I
was
haven't looked, but I
wasn't
could.
was didn't he wear gloves? I think I
Um,
You'd have to
maybe
do something.
in my mind I
cover
always
it up. You know
yeah
what I'm saying?
like
Like
I really
gross.
I could be totally once again I'm a more mediocre historian than you are, but I thought I remembered him wearing gloves to cover it up. I could be I
Don't eat
could
his
be
food at the potluck. Is
I
all I gotta say.
could be totally wrong about that though.
Hey, would you eat in his kitchen, Brian? Yes or no?
Nope.
Would you
He
eat
would be on the
food from his
list.
kitchen?
Well,
He'd be on
hey,
the list.
listen, bloodborne illnesses won't aren't contagious
Hey,
until
I do have pictures of his stomata.
Okay.
yeah
Do you want to see it?
yeah
Ah,
Uh,
yeah.
okay, hold on.
mm,
Let's see. Can you?
I
oh,
can't
oh, we
see.
lost him. He's moving down. It was just see his forehead.
Okay, look at
Oh,
his
that's
hand.
cool. Wow.
Oh. Oh.
Wow.
Ooh.
That's a
Mm,
color photo and everything. Yep.
yikes.
Do you understand? That's bananas.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome.
This is another picture. This was the first ever picture that he took. Um, Let me see if I can get to it. Get out of here. Cookies. We understand. What even is cookies? Who knows? This is a lot less graphic because it's not in color, but peep the holes.
Yeah.
Can you kind of see?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
allowed this photo to be taken. He, under obedience to his superiors, he let it happen. Yo, that's I
Yeah.
just don't know.
You don't know what. You don't know why. You don't know what it's about. You don't know.
You understand? Like this
Mhm.
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
Once again,
Hmm.
Look,
we serve a God who incarnated himself among humans and
yes,
died and rose. So
it's a
sure,
fact.
why not?
Like it happened one way or
Yeah.
the other. So anyway, Rosie smelling blood,
Hmm.
holy hands, quite
Hmm.
literally, a cup of blood a day.
Hmm.
Um, Pio came to know the depth of the suffering of our Savior
Hmm.
through his stigmata,
Hmm.
right? And he said, I am an instrument in divine hands, and I am useful only when manipulated by the divine mover.
Mm, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm thine, O Lord. I've heard thy voice as it told thy love to me. That's I mean, yeah, that's right.
So,
I think some God times God gives us these things like this to show us what it looks to our faith exists in the ether sometimes. We don't think about the tangible reality of stuff.
do
And
we think
sometimes
Paul was a stigmatic?
with this thorn in the flesh,
Yeah.
Hmm.
what I've been the okay, so scholars I've read, grain of salt, none of us were there. Most scholars I've read believe that Paul's thorn in the flesh was an eye condition.
Hmm.
Like St. Francis.
Well, okay, going back, maybe. I mean, yeah, going back to when he was struck blind. Remember when he was struck blind? They said it's like like scales fell off.
Scales come off. Hmm.
And you see several you will see there's several mentions in his letters. I think to Galatians he says you would have given me your very eyes if you could have. And then another letter, I think it's Timothy, but I'm not quite sure about that one. One of the pastoral letters, he mentions it. Look how large my handwriting is as I sign this letter now. So there seems to be some evidence in the text that Paul was suffering from something with
Eye
it.
condition.
Yeah, that we don't know, but
Yep.
lot of scholars think it's on the flesh may be an eye related condition. So, but hey, who knows? I
Interesting.
wasn't there. I do think I don't think it was a stigmata because you got to remember Luke, who wrote Acts, was maybe the best archivist in the scriptures and documented everything. So I think
Yeah.
if Paul had something like
That's
that,
fair.
Luke
That would
would
have
have
made it.
said, "Hey," and this happened because Luke
Yeah.
also records the snake bite.
Yep.
So I think Luke would have
Yeah, that's fair.
probably would have made mention of that if that had been the case.
Do you know what's even crazier? Like
Was
even
that?
more bonkers? Father Padre Pio. I would
Mm-hmm.
just call him Father, but it's fine. Pio died because Padre's father, right? So I just call him
Yes.
Father. He died in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
He kept the stigmata his whole life
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
from that time. So
68.
66 years,
Yeah.
66 years, this man lived
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
losing a cup of blood a day.
Mhm.
Hmm. It's
Do y'all
crazy.
understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
That's
that's so
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's
wow.
But I mean, it is he had on him the wounds of Christ, and that is a little. We speak of metaphor of suffering with Christ. We speak of metaphor of I am crucified with Christ, yet it's he who lives within me. Well, I mean, he was literally suffering the wounds of Christ.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is unnerving. But the Bible, when the book of Acts, so often in Acts, I do think. I mean, I said last week about how our faith has become too relatable to professional. Sometimes with the signs and wonders freak our modern eyes and ears out
Hmm.
in a way that it doesn't in some parts of the world, in a way that it doesn't historically. And so
Hmm.
I think we have become too analytical for our own good, and we try to explain away miracles. And I think that God moves in ways that we don't always understand. And
Amen.
I think that we Western enlightened particularly mainline Christians, are very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get over it.
Yeah.
I think we need to get over it. Um, it's like when you're in a particularly, I think of a friend of mine in seminary who was a member of a African American Pentecostal denomination called the Church of God in Christ, uh, abbreviated COGIC. He couldn't get over how we Methodists did church. He always would ask me, he said, Andy, what would you do if the Holy Spirit led you to do something in worship that wasn't in the bulletin? I said, well, first off, the Holy Spirit's not going to do that. And
Mm.
secondly, if the Holy Spirit was going to do that, the Holy Spirit, he would let me know by Thursday so I could put in the bulletin. He said, what would you do if one Sunday somebody stood up and yelled, Amen in your church? I said, look at him and I go, shh, we're in church. What are you doing? Hush. Like we Western intellectual Christians believe the mind is sanctified and the emotion can't be trusted and the miraculous can't be trusted. We explain away the miraculous and the divine sometimes, but we don't apply the same skepticism to the mind. And I think we get ourselves in trouble there. I do.
I agree.
And by the way, let me be clear. That I just described myself as well because that's what
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
distrusting of emotion. So like, I mean, but I think that's I think sometimes John Wesley said, he said, I do not fear that there will ever cease to be a people called Methodists that exist in Europe on the continent. I fear they would be a dead sect having the trappings of religion, but not the power thereof. Yeah. Dr. Bryant used to always say, we've become the church Wesley tried to reform.
Ow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll end on this note. Pio is going to be somebody that we'll do a deep dive on at some point because he also had the powers of bilocation, supposedly, which is Hermione's time
who?
turner, Hermione Granger. You wouldn't know. You're not a millennial, but
Didn't she play for
she
the
has she
Pacers?
has
Oh, that was Danny Granger.
she has the ability to, yeah, she's the daughter of Danny Granger. She
Hmm.
has the ability to be in two places at once because she can travel in time, and that's something that
So,
apparently Padre Pio can do.
so did Loki.
Your attempt at relativism is not impressing me.
We're listing people
I
that
just got
could.
to be honest with you, but mostly it's because I'm bitter. I haven't watched it yet, so
Oh,
I,
it's so good. It's so
I just
good.
There's a book and a movie called The Time Traveler's Wife, and he did the same thing. He moved back and forth.
I think that's
Not
very
real.
a deep cut, and I love that early 2000s reference come through, Brian.
It's all
Very
right.
good.
You like it? You like them? You don't like my Def Leppard reference?
No, it's from the 80s. Gross. Boo. Hiss.
The 80s is the best decade ever. The greatest things were
Hard
generated
pass.
and made in the 80s. That's me. I was part of
I
that.
knew that's where you were going, and
That's
I'm
exactly right.
again not impressed.
1985, we built this city on rock and roll, was number one on the charts. Yes. Yep,
85.
man, bring me back.
Yeah, I remember
Take me back.
that was a good year. That was the Bears and the Royals won the World Series. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
I
happening? What's
I
happening?
I define years by who won the championships because I'm old.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, I want to wrap up by encouraging our listeners and our viewers to, ooh la la,
Oh, yeah. One of the
to
greatest
follow
things.
us on our Instagram or our Facebook at Methodist of the Madness. Be sure to go back and listen to previous episodes. And thank you for checking this one out. We're so glad that you decided to chill with us today. Closing thoughts, boys. Anything you want to add?
Uh, stigmatas are terribly inconvenient.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't feel the need to always understand or explain your faith.
Yeah, that's good. I like that one.
That's good. Yeah.
Mhm.
Very good. All right, friends, remember that you're loved, you matter, and as the great theologian Robert Downey Jr. once said, listen, smile, agree, and then do whatever you were going to do anyway. We love y'all. We'll see you next episode. Bye.
So
Au
yeah.
revoir.